The purpose of this video is to provide instruction and information to the hunter who is interested in processing their wild game meat at home. Let's start with an average size Yukon moose. One can expect to get about 60% of meat with bones back from the field. From here, the trimming, cutting, and processing will reduce this even further to approximately 40% of meat that you put in your freezer. One of the most important things that you can do that will influence the amount of meat that you end up with will be the length of time the animal is hung to age. Under ideal temperature conditions, the maximum amount of tenderness is obtained within 14 days. Most hunters do not have access to a temperature-controlled environment, so the sooner you process your animal, the more meat you will end up with. The quality and quantity of the various cuts starts with learning how to butcher your animal in the field. What I take into the field with me is a simple few items. I take a collapsible meat saw that I can use to make those cuts through the bone, cut the legs. I take a sturdy knife, and in addition to that, I take with me a couple different types of meat bags. Cheesecloth type. These are good and strong. The nice thing about these type of game bags are that they protect the meat from dirt and leaves and other debris that you want to keep off the meat. So as soon as the animal is, the portions are cut off the carcass, they're put into a meat bag right away. The other thing I have here, I had this made a few years ago, is a light cloth bag. You'll notice that it has a drawstring, two purposes. One is to draw the bag closed when I have meat in it. And the other thing I find when I'm in the field is I can use this to suspend the meat off the ground and cool it out. And that's why I also have these made up in advance. So I can use, once I have these filled with meat, I can use these ropes. I'll just fold them over themselves. And then I can suspend this again for the purposes of getting that meat up off the ground and cooling it out. The other thing I take along with me is a few Ziploc bags that I can put the heart, the liver, the kidney, the tongue, items that I want to bring home. So those are items that I would take in the field to start the process out with. The other items that I have once I bring the animal home, I'm processing it. I have a variety of knives. The important thing here is that not such the size or whatnot, is that what you're comfortable in using. I have a boning knife to get in and around the joints and around the bones. I have a larger knife for cutting steaks and the larger pieces of meat. A sharpening steel. This is a much sturdier knife that I'll use for cutting through large blocks of meat, frozen meat if I'm processing later on. And I also have use a cutting board. You'll notice the surface of the table that I have here is an arborite surface. It's a smooth, it's a non-porous, and it makes cleanup and keeping it sterile much easier. I'll use a bucket like this for putting scraps in that I may want to process at a later date for hamburger, for stew meat, or for sausage. When I'm cutting and wrapping, I generally don't have time to process this, to make further do any processing. So what I'll do is I'll put it in here. I have a lid for it, or sometimes I'll use a plastic bag to put in there to seal it up. You want to make it airtight. And the other nice thing is in the freezer they stack nicely. A couple of these will stack easily in the freezer, and so I'll use those. They quite often, and it's a bit of a personal choice, some people like to double wrap their meat. They'll put the meat cuts into a plastic bag and then wrap it with paper. The purpose of the plastic is to have an airtight seal, and then the paper wrapping allows you to protect the plastic from ripping or tearing or punctures in the freezer, as well as identify the cuts So what I'll do is, and it's important to identify what it is you have. So I've gotten these stamps that I use. So I'll identify the species, the type of steak, roast, burger that's in the package. You may want to mark on the package the number of steaks in there, the weight of the roast or something like that. I have this tin can and to hold the butcher string for tying the roasts up. When I clean up in the sink, you should use hot soapy water with about 2 tablespoons of bleach for a gallon of water. For the surface, the table surface here, I have a bottle. This is a bottle that I've cleaned out, and it has a water bleach solution. And then I'll wipe it down with a clean paper towel, and then I've cleaned the surface, and it's been sterilized for future use. So what we have here, we have a caribou. We have the neck piece. We have the ribs with the front legs attached. We've cut at the very last rib here, and I'll explain the significance of that when we get the hind portion here. But it's in manageable pieces. And what I would like to demonstrate is once we get this animal home, we want to process it, those portions that aren't benefited comparatively with the process of aging. The meat on the neck, the rib meat, and the trim meat is ultimately going to end up into either burger, ground for burger, ground to make sausage with, or possibly into stew meat, which either mechanically or in the cooking process will compensate for those tougher cuts. So none of these portions then really need to be hung and aged, because we're going to achieve that tenderizing in the cooking and or the mechanical grinding process. So the first thing to do is get home is to process those portions that we want to that don't need to be aged. Okay, so I've taken the neck off. The other thing that you're going to do in the field is, depending on the circumstances, you're going to take it apart in consideration to how you're going to transport it. Whether you're going to have to be packing it on your back, whether you're carrying it a short distance to put in a boat, whether you have access to a four-wheeler or a skidoo that you can come alongside and load those pieces in. So the other thing that you'll notice here is what they've done is they've split the brisket here, which allows or facilitates taking the insides out of the animal intact, reducing the risk of puncturing the stomach and getting stomach contents on the meat that can taint it and accelerate the spoiling process when you do get it home. So that's something that I recommend doing in the field, and as I demonstrated earlier that with the tools I use, I'll start with, once I open it up, is cutting it with the meat saw, and to make it a much easier job of taking the stomach and that out. So we're going to start with the neck, and I'm going to use the knife, the boning knife. And because these are pieces that are going to end up into the grinder or into stew meat, so actually I'll start with the back here because I got to take this out. So basically what I'm going to do or try to do here is just fillet this off. In the neck, there's a lot of different bones in here, and so it's very difficult to get all of these out, all the meat out. Another thing I have here is this tendon here that attaches the head to the muscles. We want to take that off. And that we'll put in the scrap bucket. That's certainly not as clean as it probably could, but my family and I like to make soup, and the neck bones are ideal for that because there's always a bit of meat on the neck that is very difficult to get out. So we maximize the amount of return from the animal into the freezer by taking this, and we're going to slice this up later on and set this aside as soup bones. So now we have the two portions of the neck. So we're going to trim off portions that don't need that. The other nice thing, the other advantage of taking these portions and processing them as soon as you get home is that there's very little lost to drying out that you would get in the aging process when you get your animal home and hang them to age. And you can just set those aside. A bucket to set those into, or tray. So we've taken the neck, we've taken the substantial portion of meat off the neck, and now we can deal with the rest of the carcass here. So I'll just take those and set those aside for now. Now, if this was a moose and in the field, you'd be taking these fronts off in the field simply because you'd need to reduce the weight. In most circumstances, you'd need to reduce the weight in order to move the animal around, get it back to, like I said, whether you were a boat or four-wheeler or some method that you got in the field, and physically be able to handle that amount. So, okay, so I got the two fronts. We'll deal with those in a minute. So now, if we were in the field, if we separated it, now this is where we start to take off the portions that are better quality cuts than others, and starting starting from the head backwards, and dealing next with this portion here, we're going to take off the backstrap portion of the caribou here, and this may not be the ideal one, but nonetheless, what you'll find is that there's a seam that you're looking for where the muscles on the ribs kind of find themselves separated from the muscles that run along the back. So we're going to try and find that and just slowly peel them out. So if you can see there, then there's the seam. And then you're going to use your knife, whether it's in this instance it's a boning knife with a lot of flexibility, or the knife that you're using in the field. You basically are just going to follow along and kind of scallop that band of muscles off here. And you get down. So we've taken off the backstrap, and you can see the width of this is not very wide. So if we leave this to age for too long, we're going to lose a lot in trimming. So it emphasizes the point of how much you're going to gain by letting it age versus what you're going to lose in the trimming process. So you may want to consider that when you've got the animal home, and you can maximize the amount of meat that you put in your freezer and make those adjustments in the cooking process. So that's the one side, and we'll take the other side off. Again, the other side here, we got a bit of trimming to do. We've basically taken the back strap off, exposing an area here where the sawing is going to do little or no damage because we've taken the meat off and the quality cuts. And we want to take the ribs off so we can just what we've taken is basically the one half side of the ribs. It's kept it in a plate, and we're going to strip the meat off the ribs. You can see there's some drying here, and so we may have to trim liberally around there, which emphasizes my point earlier that we want to start and process as soon as we can when we get home, because the ribs, the rib meat, and the neck meat is meat that you're going to accommodate to tenderize it in the cooking process by slow cooking it or turning it into hamburger or stew meat. So, okay, we've taken off the both plates of ribs from either side. We got a little bit of trimming here to do. In the field, similarly as here, you would take time to trim this up, take all the meat off here, have your meat bag nearby so as it comes off in any portions or chunks that you take it off, you can put it away into the bag and keep any of the dirt and leaves and stuff off of it, keeping it clean. There's lots of little nicks and cuts along here. Those are areas that are prone to spoiling very quickly. So again, emphasizing my earlier point that this is meat that needs to be processed or preserved as soon as you get home with it. Okay, so for the most part, it looks like we've got her pretty well cleaned off. And you can see we've scalloped the meat off, the backstrap meat off, cut the ribs. Now we have the ribs to deal with. And we're going to bring them out, and we're going to show you the difference between ribs that are have not been dried out and the difference in what you end up with. So what we got here is the bison ribs. I've taken them off in the field, similar to as you saw with the caribou. I've split through the brisket. I'd taken off the on the back. I stripped off the back strap and the rib portion of it, prime rib portion of it, and then cut it. And this is what I'm left with, is this plate of ribs. You can see the difference, the amount of drying or the lack of drying that is occurred here. And so other than a little bit of trimming, I'm going to be able to use all of this, or be able to salvage all of this for either burger or make the into ribs. So I'll just tidy them up a bit. So we're going to turn all this into hamburger, because we're going to save the ribs, the other half, and make ribs with the bone in. And so a bison burger is an exceptional burger, and so I'm going to use this half to make into burger. So we're going to strip this off. You're going to just score along the ribs on either side of the bone. And this is something like I'd said earlier, if you're going to strip these ribs in the field, you're going to have to deal with these ribs as soon as you get home, because otherwise they will spoil quickly. If for some reason when you get home and you're not able to do this right away, and you've stripped it in the field, you can always roll it up, put it in the freezer, take it out and thaw it later to process it. So. Now that may need a little tidying up, but for the most part, what we've ended up with is a very high percentage of the meat off the ribs with little or no wastage. So the difference between the amount that we get off this set of ribs and the set of ribs that we dealt with the caribou is probably about 80% versus 20 or 30%. So let's just trim this up. Okay, we've gotten to where we get the two front quarters. So we're going to take the quarter, I'll move it up here. First things first, we'll just kind of tidy them up, take off some of that skin. There is a bit of what looks like loose blood there from probably where it was shot. So, and we're going to just kind of trim away some of this stuff that is not going to find its way into a roast or steak, and we'll save that for burger. And trim that up. So what we're trying to get off this is the area here from kind of the elbow down and around, and this is what they call the cross rib. You can make steaks or roasts out of it. The other thing that I do or like to do is take the meat off the blade portion here and tie them together and make a small blade roast. I know the other way to do it, and again, it would depend on if you have access to a bandsaw. This is where you would cut across here to get the blade steaks. So if you're going to if you either have a bandsaw or you may have access to one or take one to have it cut for you, this is the portion that you would save to cut into blade steaks. But for us, we're going to do the other way. So you cut in there, right at the elbow, and again, you're just going to get onto there. You just follow down along the bone, using the bone as a guide, and you can get right down to the joint there, and then you curve. And right where the joint is, you're going to have to lift the blade up a little bit, and then again using just follow that up. So you've taken out that wedge, you follow down along, cut here by the elbow, you follow down along the bone, and right here there's a little ridge where the two bones join up and then around, and then using the blade of the edge of the scapula, and then follow that up. So we'll set that aside, and then Like I said, I want to take the two muscles off the blade, and we'll make a nice, let's see what we end up with. This is where the, although this is not extremely flexible, but the flexibility of the blade helps you here when you come in and just use it to scallop along. Up into there. And just about there, we're going to cut right down through there. So there's the one half. And then we'll take the other side off. Again. Using, again, like I said, the bone on one side as a backstop, and just kind of scalloping along around that, cutting that off. Okay, so what we're going to do, then we'll take these two pieces. You could make steaks with them, but there's a tendon that's in there that's pretty tough, so we'll just set those there, and we'll tie those for a roast. And the balance of this is we're going to just scallop it off and save for burger or sausage. So. So again, we're going to just cut this into portions. We're cutting across these tendons just to make it easier for the grinder. So we're going to start with this. Now, I'll just make it, get off this little bit of connective tissue. So we can get our knife under there and take off some of this silver skin. Okay. So what we'll do, just set those on there. Can with a string in it. Keep the string from rolling around while you're done. So just spin it around, pull it through. Tighten it up, and then a half hitch. On this caribou, we're going to end up with just this one little small roast, but on a moose, you could end up with, depending on how large, how large you make your roast for your family or that, then you'll quite likely end up with 2 or 3 or possibly 4. So there's a little roast. And now we're going to make this into a roast. Given the size of the cut of meat that we have from this Dempster caribou, our options are a bit limited in what we can do with this. What we're going to do is make a roast out of it. But if we were dealing with something the size of a moose or a bison, then we could make a roast as well as some steaks out of it. Some people will make roasts, a lot of roasts, and then simply cut them into steaks at a later time as they need them, rather than they go through the process of cutting steaks at the time they're doing the butchering. So, but we're going to do this one into a roast. So, normally what I would do, because I would make the roast out of this end here, I would cut this, I'd cut back this tendon because it's a big tendon that attaches into here. But for our purposes, I'm going to cut this off, and so taking that out, I don't need to do that for this piece. So. So now we have that cross rib roast along with our blade roast. And then we'll just take these portions and put them in for our burger. Okay. The other items we took off the front is the back straps. And as I said earlier, you can see how small they are from a caribou. So the amount that of wastage that and how it's going to impact on this cut of meat, it'd be quite dramatic if we left it to dry or age for any length of time. So the less amount of aging that this cut of meat, the better, and then we can make those compensations in the cooking process of the grilling, whether you marinate it or slow cook it or how you want to do it. But, so we're just going to tidy it up a little bit. This is the portion that comes from the head and works its way back, and similarly here, you can see I've got them matched up here. This is the area of the backstrap where the muscle groups from the neck and the back come together, and it's also the area what you would identify and refer to as the rib or prime rib area. And because of the size of these this portion of the backstrap, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these together to make a nice like a rib roast for these. So I'll just get a here, and I'm just going to put them together. Okay, now I can just trim that up a bit if I like. Okay, now we have a little prime rib roast. And these guys here, again, because of the size of the backstrap, or this portion of it, I could trim this off, and I might if it were dirty, but in this case it's not bad. And also to maximize the options that you'll have later on for cooking it, I'm just going to cut this into portions that that you can take out and marinate and barbecue and that kind of thing, and adjust for the trimming when you take it out to cook. So those are going to be, I'll just package them in portions like that. I may trim up the end a little bit. The other thing is it's just way too good a cut of meat in order to put into burger. So I want to salvage that. So I'm going to set those aside. Okay, what we have here now is we got a young bison, and we're going to start working on it. But what there's a couple of things in addition to the meat cuts I want to emphasize and explain. What I've done here is I've separated the portion of the backbone that would normally, or you might normally take off the tenderloins. The tenderloins would be scalped off here and here, and of course the back strap portion would be taken off this part here. But what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to tidy it up a little bit, and because I have access later on to a bandsaw, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and cut it into the T-bone steaks, and you can see the tenderloin portion and the backstrap portion here, and this is what's going to I'm going to make into the T-bone steaks. So what I've done in the field was right behind the ribs, I went through the backbone right behind the ribs. If you were cutting beef, or where they cut beef is between the second and third rib. But because I have limitations in the field as to how I carry this out, what I've done is I've come in right behind the last rib. That way, this portion that I've taken off doesn't have those 2 extra ribs sticking out to make it more difficult to pack or to carry for that. So, and I lost really nothing because I've taken the backstrap off the forward portion, and I'll cut steaks or make something out of that. So what I've done, I'll take that out. Where I've separated at the back, so I've done right behind the rib in the front. Where I've done in the hind portion is, this is the last joint that separates the backbone from what's called the H-bone or the pelvic bone. And where I've done is I've separated right through here. You can see where the bone attaches in there and fall down. And where I locate that is on either side where the flank comes in, follow the bone down, or I'll take my knife and go through, and you'll just cut it. You just cut through the joint here, get your knife down in there, and then just follow it all the way up and take that side off, and come around here. It's a bit of a tricky joint to get out, especially with the knife, because you can see how it goes into here. So you may want to take your saw and cut through there. But once you've got it separated, and what I've done already is I've taken the one hind off, and now I'm going to take the other one off. And what that does is, on this bison, it's a young bison, and the size of the pelvis isn't that big. But on a large bison or a large moose, it's a substantial bone that if we trim the meat off carefully, we can leave this in the field, and it doesn't need to come home with us, because we can salvage all we need to. So what I'll do is I'll start again. You're going to find that. So I'll just start. And then what I'm doing is I'm keeping the bone to the one side, and I'm cutting on the other. What that allows me to do is to make sure that I get all the meat that's available, or certainly the vast majority of it. I'll get this out of the way there. And I'll just... put some pressure down here so I can start to hinge or lever out the ball socket out of this, or the ball out of the socket. There's a little tendon in there that holds it together. And then just careful. The one word of caution when you are doing this in the field, you can see there's an area in here that is quite thin. The hazard with taking this out in the field is that the bladder lies in there, and so you can take this out and leave the bladder in there, but you have to be aware that it is there and carefully scallop over that so you don't puncture the bladder. But if you're aware that it's there, it can easily be avoided. There's a little bit of trimming to do on that, but this is what we end up with, is the hindquarter with this top cut of meat in there, which is called the top sirloin, and it's a very good cut of meat. And all too often, what you tend to end up with is where someone will, because it's one thing to demonstrate it here where you have the leverage of the table, but in the field it's a little trickier. But it can be done. It's just patience and taking your time. But quite often what happens is it gets cut off about halfway down. So a portion that is left on this bone here, and either unfortunately it may be left in the field, or it comes out as in the trim in the field, it ends up as just chunks of meat that quite likely is going to go into burger or possibly stew, and it's unfortunate because it's a much better cut of the meat, and so we want to salvage that. So we have our hind. We'll trim that up a little bit later, and we can take the little bit of trimming there, but for the most part we've got it pretty well cleaned off. And that is a substantial bone that we can leave out in the field. So the one word, once we got this, and I had mentioned of the portions of meat that you might want to hang and age a bit, the hindquarters and possibly the front quarters, as long as they're not don't have bullet damage, could benefit from some aging. Okay. But the one word of caution is, as you've seen here, taking the hind off this bone, there's a lot of little nicks and cuts in there. So that's an area that you have to watch very, very closely, because it's an area where bacteria will start to grow and it could spoil very quickly. Okay, so we have the first portion that we're going to take off this hindquarter is the top sirloin part of this. It's a similar kind of a muscle structure like the prime rib portion at the top of the back of the hind legs is where the muscles come together, and you'll get some marbling at where the muscles come together. So I'm just going to take that off. And you can see that what I meant is how it gets marbled in there. So we're going to set that aside, and we'll make that into roasts or steaks later on. We'll make the initial cuts into the muscle groups and go from there. And the first one we're going to start with is we're going to take this top muscle group off, and this is called the sirloin tip. And you start in here. We're going to just take the knife and go in there. We come down till we hit bone, and then we kind of turn it so we can go straight down, trying to follow the bone as we go. And what we've done is we've just come in and followed this bone all the way down to that ball. And that's the first one. So we'll set that aside. And the next cut we're going to make, we're going to come down through here and join where our initial cut is. And we'll just roll it this way. Okay, so we've got our cut there. We've just come here and just basically joined up and made a line across there. And then we'll take our boning knife and we'll just using the bone as a guide. And we're going to set this aside. We're going to trim this, basically the lower part of the leg and the balance of this muscle group here we're going to make into burger and set it aside for sausage. And we may even take some pieces out there for stew meat, but for the most part that's where we're going to get our burger from. So we have the top sirloin, we have the sirloin tip, and this is we're going to get our inside, outside, and eye of round cuts. So we'll take this, and we're just going to more or less follow the muscle groups. I think anyone that's done any amount of cutting probably is quite familiar with this process. So. Okay, so what we have here, we've just folded this open, and we have our outside round, we have our eye of round, and we have the inside round portions. And then we can decide a steaks and roasts out of that. The outside round, because of the way it's constructed, I like to make steaks out of, primarily. The eye around, make little grilling steaks, and then I'll take the inside round and I'll make half of it into steaks and the other half into a roast. Okay, so we trimmed up this portion off of the outside round, and we're going to start with cutting this for some steaks. So depending on the width of the steaks, that's a personal choice. And just square it up a bit, and then just the next one I'm going to do is the eye around. You want to square it up. And again, you just decide the thickness. These are going to make them into kind of quick little grilling steaks. So we did the outside round, the inside round, or the eye of round, and now we're going to do the inside. So what we're going to do is we're going to split this in half, and we're going to make steaks out of the half, and we're going to make a roast out of the other half. Now, if you were going to make a roast out of the inside or the outside, and you had a choice, the inside makes a better roast than the outside. So I'm going to do just that. So. Separate this in half or so. A couple little roasts, inside round roasts. So now we have the other half of the inside round, and we're going to cut this into steaks. So I'll just square it up for our first cut. And again, depending on how thick you'd like them. So we have outside round, eye round, and inside. We have the sirloin tip. This is the first large muscle that we, or I guess second group, but off. We can go a couple different ways, but like the caribou, depending on the size of the muscle, we may have limited choices. And for a large moose or a large bison, what I would do is split it in half and make roasts out of one half and steaks out of the other half, and you kind of maximize the variety of cuts that you would get. But for this one, I think if I were to do that, I think the steaks would be, unless you prefer smaller steaks and roasts, it's just too small. So what I'll do is I'm going to tie up a portion of it and then make the steaks of the other part. Okay, now the last portion we're going to configure into something is this portion here. So what we're going to do is we're going to make that into So that's the top sirloin, and those are your steaks and roasts out of the hind, and the rest we're going to do into maybe some more stew meat and burger. So I'll start by turning this out of the way. So the last piece that we have, we're going to do, we're going to just tidy these up a little bit. And do the trimming now, because we're going to freeze this, and we're going to run them through the bandsaw to make those T-bones. And we're going to set this in the freezer later on. And once it's frozen, we'll have it cut into T-bone steaks. In addition to the information contained in this video, it is important to experiment with a variety of cooking methods, especially for lean wild game meat. Additional information can be obtained on meat cuts and cooking by visiting www.beefinfo.org.